In 2020, we have all been challenged, and in 2020, Israel Policy Forum's mission to advance and achieve the goal of a viable two-state solution was pushed to the brink.
As for the annexation of the West Bank, the Israelis will ultimately make those decisions. That's an Israeli decision.
But Israel Policy Forum has remained strongly committed to our values. We have worked to show why the two-state solution remains the only viable option to resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We have articulated why the Trump plan represents a blueprint for West Bank annexation. And we stood strong and in the lead against unilateral West Bank annexation that would endanger any possible future for two states and harm Israel's ties to the broader region.
If Israel pursues this unilateral course of annexation, you could actually see a fracturing, particularly on the Hill in Congress.
As we look to a new year ahead and new possibilities, our work has never been more important, more relevant, been more necessary than it is today.
We're headed into an important period in Washington, a time of change. A new president of the United States will take office, as will a new Congress. It's an important time for the voice of Israel Policy Forum to be heard.
Thank you to the Israel Policy Forum. Thank you for your leadership.
It's great to be back at the Israel Policy Forum.
I value IPF as a resource, and IPF so accessible to members of Congress and to our staffs. And
IPF's Michael Campos has written about this compellingly in recent days.
To bring forward the type of truthful, careful analysis that we're well known for, that can favorably influence the relationship between Israel and the United States and between Israel and the Palestinians. Together, by bringing this type of honest assessment forward, we can make a contribution to bettering life in the Middle East.
As Israel normalizes with its neighbors, we'll continue to analyze this process and to explain how this momentum can be utilized to make progress on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
With the increasing polarization in the Jewish community and throughout America, education is more critical than ever. Israel Policy Forum has the credibility, the expertise, and the tools to cut through the noise and provide concrete value for the community. We are partnering with institutions across North America at the forefront of elevating the discourse away from tired talking points aimed to score political points and toward a more meaningful understanding of the opportunities and challenges ahead.
IPF Atid is Israel Policy Forum's Young Professional Program. Atid is really filling a gap. There's so many leaders of the next generation. Leaders who are grappling with the complexities of this issue. Those who are seeking deeper understanding and opportunities for meaningful engagement. Atid is providing the blueprint for how to equip the next generation with the knowledge and tools necessary to be impactful advocates for Israel's security and a lasting two-state solution, not just in the future, but right now.
Our mission remains under threat. Many challenges loom large. But as we head to a new year with new possibilities, this is our moment. Good evening. I'm Susie Gelman, Board Chair of Israel Policy Forum. Thank you all for joining us for our first and hopefully our only virtual annual event. Let me begin by saying thank you to the members of our board who've shown such dedicated leadership in navigating the turbulent waters over this past year. It's such an honor to work alongside each and every one of you in our pursuit of a secure, Jewish, democratic Israel. Thank you also to our supremely talented staff, whose creativity and commitment have been outstanding in 2020. A special toda rabah to our Executive Director, David Halprin, whose professional leadership this year has been phenomenal. And of course, on behalf of all of us at Israel Policy Forum, thank you to all of you our supporters. You have made it possible for us to expand our work in this challenging year. Soon, this annus horribilis will come to an end. Soon, the Trump presidency will come to an end. And soon, God willing, the pandemic will end as well. Israel Policy Forum will begin 2021 stronger than ever, at a moment when our work is truly critical. Without a doubt, the coming year will bring both challenges and opportunities for Americans, Israelis, and Palestinians alike. We are ready to seize the moment, meet the challenges, and capitalize on the opportunities that 2021 will bring across all three layers of our work, in Washington and in the Jewish community and with young professionals. This evening, we will highlight these three pillars of our work by honoring three individuals who have set an example for effective policy, community, and next-generation leadership. In Washington, Israel Policy Forum provides a vision for what constructive U.S. diplomatic leadership can and should look like going forward. We will continue to promote pragmatic policies and in-depth research while creating a blueprint to preserve and advance a two-state vision and maintain the strength of Israel's security and the U.S.-Israel alliance. This work is essential as we engage a new administration in an increasingly polarized Washington landscape. In tackling this challenge, we are inspired by Dick Ravitch, a stalwart member of our advisory council, who is no stranger to facing policy challenges with creativity and dynamism. Dick has been amongst the most enthusiastic supporters of our work in recent years. An early leader in the effort to organize the New York Jewish Community Relations Council, Dick is best known for his success in marshaling efforts to tackle New York's fiscal crises. And today, he is sought after for guidance on how to address the current one. We are most privileged to honor his energetic embrace of our work and his example of fearless determination and leadership to overcome truly complex obstacles. Meanwhile, in the Jewish community, we are working alongside many organizations nationwide and engaging communities through creative programming that explores the complexities of the conflict and provides the tools to enable informed discourse. In so doing, we are inspired by the leadership of Abner Goldstine, a passionate member of our advisory council. Abner is beloved throughout the Los Angeles community for his warmth, his optimism, his pursuit of knowledge, and his deep commitment to the future of Israel and the Jewish community. All who know Abner know him to be a mensch. And we are so delighted to honor Abner tonight for being the kind of leader our community needs today. One who is committed to the future and who is decent, open-minded, informed, and compassionate. Finally, we are providing a platform for the next generation of leaders in our community through IPF Atid, Israel Policy Forum's program for young professionals. IPF Atid provides emerging leaders with the honest, challenging discourse they seek and gives them the tools to be effective advocates for a viable resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict based on two states that ensures a secure Jewish democratic future for the state of Israel. So this evening, we also give special recognition to Brianna Goodland, chair of IPF Atid's Boston chapter, and a visionary who has helped shape the creation and growth of IPF Atid over the past 3 years. You will soon see why Brianna's incredible spirit, positive outlook, commitment, and leadership serve as an example to all of us. Thank you so much for joining us at our virtual gala. And thank you for your support of the important work that lies ahead. As we continue to celebrate Hanukkah, I want to wish all of you Chag Sameach. May the light of this holiday inspire us all as we look ahead to a new year and to the new possibilities we must seize to ensure that the future is indeed a bright one. Thank you.
Shalom, friends. It is such a pleasure to join with you to celebrate Abner Goldstine, one of my favorite human beings on the planet.
There is no such thing as an ideal congregant. But if you were going to build one, you would take someone who was successful in the world and understood the world, who had a devoted and loving family, and who spent his time passionately concerned with his synagogue, with the Jewish community, and with the strength and building of Eretz Israel, of the land of Israel. If you did all that, you'd have Abner Goldstine.
So tonight we celebrate Abner Goldstine for a lifetime of commitment to what matters most. A person who's taught us again and again that each one of us has the power to inspire good in others by running to do good ourselves.
He's taken remarkable leadership roles in his congregation, in the Jewish world, in matters of political advance, and in all of these, he always shows the kind of vision, long-term planning, patience, and the ability to bring out the best in any human being who's with him. That's so vintage Abner.
Abner, for me and for so many others in the Jewish community, has been someone that we've turned to for wisdom, for support, and for that wonderful combination that he has of being able both to see what's important and also to show it to others.
Abner's eyes tell you most of what you need to know about him. They tell the story of his passion and his excitement and his concern and his commitment. Abner's eyes shine all the time. They show you that he's generous and he's wise and tireless in his dedication.
You want to be in his presence. You feel uplifted just by him being Abner. Which brings me to his third and I think possibly his greatest gift, and that is his extraordinary smile. Anyone who has been in the room with Abner Goldstine when he smiles knows that the room lights up. And that means especially if you're in the room with his beloved Raz, who is his partner in every area of life and equally inspiring as a human being.
And he doesn't do it for kavod, for honor. Although he would like Raz to get the honor, and she deserves it, he doesn't do it for himself. He does it for Klal Yisrael. He does it for the Jewish people. And the Jewish people and Sinai and the land of Israel are lucky to have Abner Goldstine.
To see the way he holds his many friends and keeps us all moving forward, the way he offers an inspiring word, well, that just makes him an extraordinary human being in every possible way. And the last thing I just want to highlight is his deep and abiding love for the state of Israel and his keen vision for Israel as a Jewish and democratic center that will light up not only the Middle East, but the entire world.
A person who's taught us again and again that each one of us has the power to inspire good in others by running to do good ourselves. May the Holy One bless you, Abner, with health and strength so that you can continue to bless the world with your passion and compassion, with your strong moral core and sense of right and wrong, with your integrity, with your inspiration. May your sense of mission never fade, and may the vision of a healed world always remain before you. We thank you.
Oh, that video is amazing. I am speechless. I'm truly overwhelmed. Thank you so much to Rabbi Artson. Thank you very much, Rabbi Wolpe. Thank you, Rabbi Braus, my rabbis, my friends. There really is no way I can adequately thank you for your kind words. In fact, you have set a high bar for me. If I can come close to reach it, it is because of the ways in which each of you inspires me. I am, in fact, so humbled, so proud, so honored by all this attention and recognition. What excites me most, however, is the opportunity to focus on the Israel Policy Forum and its goals to achieve a viable two-state arrangement, two-state solution in which Israel can flourish as a fully democratic state, a Jewish state, and a safe and secure state. Its policy recommendations, detailed policy proposals, are supported by the Commanders for Israel's Security, an Israeli organization of over 300 experienced Israeli security experts who have held the most senior roles in Israel defense and intelligence. Their detailed policy recommendations elevate the discussion, build awareness, and support for keeping open a path to a two-state solution. IPF is continuously reaching out to U.S. government officials and members of Congress to help them understand and appreciate the details and nuances of the policy statement, and to help them understand the consequences of actions both in the U.S. and in Israel that make a two-state solution more difficult. At the same time, the Israeli Security Organization is striving to do the same in Israel. Realizing this effort is a long-term project, IPF in 2017 founded IPF Atid, a millennial-led community to allow for new connections and conversations surrounding the most pressing topics and issues in Israeli-Palestinian affairs. Brianna, who's being recognized tonight as one of the Atid leaders, is an example of the exceptional quality of its members. Many at this event are already involved in the Israeli Policy Forum. If, however, you are not, I strongly urge you to become engaged in the world. I strongly encourage you to become engaged in the work of the IPF. The eventual realization of a two-state solution is key to the type of future we all want for Israel. Watch and learn at IPF's weekly Zoom programs. Listen to its podcasts. Follow IPF's policy director, Michael Koplow's weekly commentaries and analysis. Read the policy papers and reports. Make sure your Congress representative knows about IPF and its goals, and ask your family to join with you. Lastly, if you're not already doing so, please join in providing financial support for the organization. Mazel tov to Dick Ravitch, my co-host. Mazel tov to Dick Ravitch, my co-honoree, and to Brianna Goodland for her recognition this evening. It is important for us all to recognize it is also important for us to recognize two Israel Policy Forum leaders, Susie Gelman, its board chair, and David Halpern, IPF executive director, for their work in moving this organization forward. Now to our panel. I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to have a discussion with our three guests on the changing nature of the Middle East and the status of Israel within the Jewish community. I'm pleased to be joined by three esteemed guests. Yosti Klein-Halevi is a senior fellow at the Hartman Institute, the Shalom Hartman Institute, and co-director of the Institute's Muslim Leadership Initiative. He's the author of several acclaimed titles, including Like Dreamers and The Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor. Among his other achievements, Yosi is also one of the premier students of and authority on Israeli music. Rabbi Rick Jacobs is president of the Union of Reform Judaism. Rabbi Jacobs previously spent 20 years as a visionary spiritual leader at Westchester Reformed Temple in Scarsdale, New York. And third, Tamara Kaufman-Wittis is a senior fellow at the Center for Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institution. That's where she focuses on U.S. policy in the Middle East. Wittis served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs from November 2009 to January 2012. Yossi, Rabbi Jacobs, Tamara, thank you very much for being with us here. Let's dive right in. Elections are prominent in the news. We have just gone through a bruising election in the United States, and there's talk of it in Israel, a possible fourth election in less than a 2-year period. President-elect Biden is a vocal supporter of the state of Israel, but whatever one thinks of the substance of his approach versus Trump's policy, it is clear that Biden does not carry Trump's same enthusiasm and support from a majority of Israelis. Yossi, you are on the ground in Israel. What has been the reaction in Israel, and how is the Israeli government going to deal with a president who doesn't just check off all of the boxes on their wish list?
Hi, everyone, and delighted to be with all of you. Being on the ground in Israel these days is a very complicated matter, because what it really means is I'm in my room most of the time. To say that I have the finger on the pulse of Israeli society would really be overstating the case these days. That said, I can say what I think we all know, which is that there's a vast disparity between how most American Jews and most Israelis have viewed the last two administrations. Really were mirror images of each other. Most Israelis view the Obama administration as hostile, and the Trump administration as probably the most pro-Israel administration we've ever had. And I think it's fair to say that most American Jews see things very differently. And I'll just speak for myself. I welcome Biden's approach on the Palestinians. I think we need a more activist approach and an approach that reassures the Palestinians that they do have a place in a credible place in this Middle East that's emerging. And I hope that the Biden administration will have the wisdom to build on the tremendous successes of the last few months for our countries, not just making peace with Israel, but I'd say 3 out of those 4 normalizing relations with Israel. Sudan, I think, is a little iffy. Certainly UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco are normalizing. And the last point, and this worries me very deeply, as I think it does most Israelis, is where Biden is going to go in Iran. The fear here is that the new administration will adopt wholesale, with some cosmetic changes, the Iran deal, which many Israelis, like myself, view as the single greatest strategic threat that this country has faced in decades.
Yeah, thank you, Yossi. Tamara, you've just issued a report, it's going to be out today, from the Center for New American Securities. How does that report jibe with what you think the Biden administration will be doing?
Well, Abner, first, let me say Mazal Tov. It is great to be here with you as part of this amazing event. I would love to say that the Biden administration will adopt our recommendations wholesale, but that's very unlikely. That would be a sort of think tank home run, right? We've spent a year with a fantastic group of Americans from across the political spectrum who've been involved in Israeli-Palestinian negotiations for decades to develop this report. And the report is really rooted in the idea that this conflict is not anywhere near resolution. The two parties are nowhere near resuming negotiations. And yet, that does not mean that the United States should put this issue on the back burner or walk away. That in fact, the sort of push for the holy grail of a final status agreement over the last couple of decades, while understandable and worthy for sure, that search has, in a way, devalued, pushed to the side a lot of the daily costs of this conflict for Israelis and Palestinians alike, and for the region, for its stability, and for American interests. And so the approach that we're proposing is one that really focuses American attention on, number one, addressing some of the urgent issues that prevent the United States from being an effective convener on this conflict at the moment, including resuming a relationship with the Palestinians. Number two, sustaining the viability of a two-state outcome. And number three, really focusing on steps that can be taken to advance freedom, to advance security, to advance prosperity for everyone living between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea today. And there is a lot that can be done today. So what we're not recommending is a kind of appoint a new senior presidential envoy and convene a new round of final status negotiations. But we are suggesting an approach that will position the United States in a sustainable way to improve lives and livelihoods, to improve security, and to lay a foundation for more productive negotiations down the road when the parties are ready.
Thank you, Tamara. Hopefully they're listening. Biden administration is listening, reading the report and listening to you. Let's question for you, Rabbi Jacobs. A significant majority of the Jews over the past 30 years or more, Jews in the United States, have voted for the Democratic presidential candidate. This November, again, the Jewish vote was overwhelmingly for Joe Biden. Yet at the same time, we have had a dichotomy of views within the Jewish community. On the one hand, there's been some sense that Trump was fueling anti-Semitism on the right, and conversely, there was some concern that there was a grave threat of anti-Semitism and hostility to Israel arising from the far left. I would welcome your thoughts on this, both in how that influenced the 2020 voting and how that is going to play out in the future.
First of all, let me also congratulate you, Abner, and say how delighted I am to be with my colleagues for this important conversation. First of all, what I think is critical to take away from the demographics of the Jewish vote in the 2020 election is that for the overwhelming majority of Jews, actually values matter. And I'm going to say it as plainly as this, that Israel matters. I think we ask sometimes the question, American Jews don't really care very much about Israel. So they're voting basically around a set of core domestic issues. I actually think that's not correct. I think what is true about American Jews is we vote our values, and our values have lined up, not entirely, but more over the years with the Democratic Party. Though I think one of the things that we know, and this was true for the Ruderman study that came out last winter, that the overwhelming majority of Jews support Israel, but the majority also have critiques of that policy. And what we have seen in the last 4 years in particular is the weaponization of what pro-Israel is about. If you don't line up according to certain policies of the current Israeli government, then you cannot be pro-Israel. The majority of American Jews push back entirely on that presumption and say, no, you actually can be a deeply committed Zionist and have critique about, frankly, questions on the left or the right. In terms of anti-Semitism, what I think most American Jews say is they don't like it on the left or the right, period. That's the majority of Jews. Now, we have gotten into all kinds of conversation about which is worse, the left-wing anti-Semitism or the right-wing anti-Semitism. That's not a winning discussion, to my mind. And I think that there's no doubt that over the last 4 years, hate has seen a growth. It's been a growth industry. And that has led, unfortunately, to a growth and increase in anti-Semitism. At the same time, I think we're all trying to negotiate what will be the new Biden administration. How will it build a different relationship with particularly the progressive and liberal Jewish community, which by and large were not a part of much of the Trump administration's views and policies. But I would just end by saying, I think that as American Jews, I'm appreciative of Donald Trump's positive policies towards Israel. I wouldn't agree with all of them, and I don't think all of them have been done in the right balance, but you have to actually give credit for the recognition of the capital of Israel as Jerusalem, also to give credit the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem, and the Abrahamic Accords. One has to be positive. Now, the question is, where do we go from this sort of foundational piece and the larger arcs of the Israel-Palestine conflict? That's still before us. And frankly, you know, the United States has to rebuild a whole world set of alliances which have been compromised in the last 4 years. So it's a complicated moment, but I think the strength of the American Jewish community is that we want to rebuild the divisiveness that has been sown into our relationship with Israel and with one another.
Regrettably, our time has run out. Rabbi Rick Jacobs, Tamara Kaufman-Wittes, Yossi Klein Halevi, thank you so much for sharing your insights and perspective this evening.
We're so proud of IPF Atid's tremendous growth in just the past 3.5 years as volunteer leaders in chapter cities and communities far across North America continue to partner with us at Israel Policy Forum, hosting innovative and engaging opportunities for their extended networks and friends and family that together help us not only advance the values we all share, but are truly transforming our communities and how they discuss Israel, while also helping bring about more informed, pragmatic policies towards a viable two-state solution.
Throughout 2020, we have been able to continue this important work without missing a beat. Together with the initiative, support, and guidance from so many of you on tonight's program, Atid leaders, partners, and friends, we have accomplished so much. Dozens of educational programs convened, op-eds written, partnerships initiated, and even our first ever community-wide survey so we can listen and understand the needs and wants of the IPF Atid network. All of these serve to mobilize our community towards a positive impact and bring in new faces to our work, including many who are now returning to Israel engagement after years away. You propel us into 2021 and the years ahead. Thank you.
Where do I begin in describing Brianna Goodlin? Brianna Goodlin is literally a force of nature. There's no better way to describe her. She has been instrumental in the growth and the success of IPF Atid over the last 4 years, starting in Chicago in 2017 and helping me launch the Chicago chapter, to planning our first policy summit, to being the inaugural chair of the Bronfman Convener Summit in 2018, to help leading the delegation to Israel and the West Bank in 2019. Brianna has quite literally traveled the world with IPF Atid and has plans to travel even more. As we enter into a new phase of growth in training hundreds of young leaders across North America, and as Brianna takes her own courageous steps forward in a new path for her career. We cannot think of a more deserving role model, partner, and personal friend of both myself and Israel Policy Forum for this very special recognition. Please join us in congratulating and thanking Brianna for all of her efforts.
Hey Brianna, Hope and I would like to tell you that we love you and we are so proud of you and all you've accomplished and all you will accomplish. You're amazing and I'm proud you're my sister.
Congratulations! Brianna, we are so proud of you. You're very deserving of this award from the Israeli Policy Forum, and you are a model for what women should be everywhere around the world.
Mazel tov!
Congrats, Brianna. I'm so excited that your hard work and dedication is being rewarded. I always knew you were going to do big things, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
You're tenacious, compassionate, intelligent, stubborn as hell, and so full of love.
Brianna, I hope it goes without saying that we're really going to miss you. You've made it a real community here, and there's so much to show for it. Thank you. Come back soon.
Mazel tov, Brianna. Congratulations on this next step, and Boston is going to miss you so much. Thank you for everything that you've done.
Mazel tov, beautiful, and good luck on your move. I wish you the best.
Hey Brianna, I don't even know where to begin with this video, but all I can say is thank you for everything you've taught us, your leadership, and of course the passion you bring every day. Good luck in Australia, mate.
Congratulations, Brianna.
Mazel tov, Brianna. May you go from strength to strength.
Brianna, congratulations on being honored here tonight. I am so proud of your dedication, drive, and passion.
Congratulations, Brianna. I've been so blessed to watch you grow and bloom, especially this past few years as you've discovered IPF and have poured yourself and your tireless energy into it. I'm so excited to see what the future holds for you. I truly believe you're going to change the world. I'm incredibly proud of you, and I love you.
I'm grateful to be recognized by people who I respect and admire so deeply. David, Susie, Adam, Shani, and the rest of Israel Policy Forum and IPF, thank you. Zionism is both uniquely political and intensely personal for so many Jews. For me, it is even more. It is the culmination of years of searching, introspection, and, in some ways, rebellion. It represents a recognition of the past and a promise for the future, but only if we're willing to put in the work in the present. It requires passion and curiosity, a dissatisfaction with the status quo, a willingness to ask hard questions, and a desire to look for practical solutions. These forces have driven me my entire life, explaining in some ways how someone raised in a conservative Christian family in Tennessee could be standing here today as a proud liberal Zionist Jew. My path to Judaism was anything but straightforward and was driven overwhelmingly by my inability to stop asking questions. Growing up in Tennessee, Christianity was all I knew. This didn't stop me from asking questions of everything, but I struggled to find what I was looking for. It wasn't until I got to college and was given a chance to explore Judaism that I realized so much of what I had been seeking and failing to find in Christianity, I found in Judaism. When I started my conversion, my rabbi told me, you're going to have a lot of questions, more than we have answers for. What matters is that you never stop asking questions, because if you aren't asking questions, you aren't thinking about this deeply enough. I first discovered Israel Policy Forum in 2017. At the time, my involvement with Israel was limited to random intellectual and political conversations. As I learned about IPF, I had no idea the impact it would have on my life and identity as a Jewish woman. I was drawn to IPF's wonkiness and policy focus on achieving a viable two-state outcome. As I pored over IPF's many analyses, I had hundreds of questions. While seeking answers, I found a community in IPF that reflected my values when it comes to Israel. Deeply Zionist, unapologetically pragmatic, and constantly questioning the status quo. Our goal for IPF in the beginning was to provide a new voice for the Israel conversation, one deeply rooted in understanding the facts on the ground and convening disparate views within the community. Since then, IPF has been a central pillar in my life, I've served on the Chicago Steering Committee and founded the Boston one. I chaired the inaugural Bronfman Convener Summit and traveled to Israel and the West Bank on the first IPFAT delegation. Along the way, I've made lifelong friends, met former Israeli prime ministers, shared beautiful Tel Aviv sunsets, cried at the Western Wall, and seen the conflict up close and personal in Hebron. While it was the policy ideas and thoughtfulness of IPF that brought me to the organization, it was the quality and compassion of the people that made me stay and inspired me to devote so much of myself to the work that we do. As someone not born Jewish, I have struggled with imposter syndrome within the Jewish community. I've constantly worried, what if people don't think I'm Jewish enough? Or what if they question my Jewish identity? However, with IPFAT, I have always felt at home with no need to prove myself. It has given me confidence in my Jewish identity and confidence to create healthier, more robust, and more nuanced conversations around Israel and our community. This community is full of people who are passionate about Israel's security, dedicated to its democracy, and staunchly committed to its Jewish character. In a space and a conflict that can feel so dark, this is my bright spot. A space where Zionism is unwavering but not uncritical, and where we understand that to achieve the future we all want for Israel, we must push not for the ideological solution, but the pragmatic one. Progress is not inevitable. We must demand and work towards it. While Judaism taught me it was okay to ask questions, IPFAT taught me that is just the first step to actually creating change. You must then use the knowledge you gain to bring others along with you, always seeking to understand more and pushing others forward towards progress and a better future. My life journey has taken strange twists and turns. 4 years ago, I had no idea what IPF was, and a year before that, I was not yet Jewish. I'm eternally grateful to IPF and my Atidnik family for embracing me and changing how I engage the world as a Jew. We always say next year in Jerusalem as part of the Passover Seder, but too often it is said without much thought or meaning. For me, next year in Jerusalem is a promise of all I seek to achieve. I hope to see many of you on the Tel Aviv beach or walking the streets of the Old City in the years to come. Bring me your questions. I will bring you mine.
This is former Congressman Steve Israel. When you're in politics, you come across many different people, and they tend to fit into different categories. Some are friends of, some are supporters of, many come and go, but some stay with you, and you stay with them. Some become the friends they are based not on the expediency of the moment, but on a true and lasting bond. A shared vision, shared values of what America is and what it must be. And that describes my friendship with Dick Ravitch, who we are honoring. In Congress, I always counted on Dick to advise me and counsel me on state and local financing, on municipal affairs, on the U.S.-Israeli relationship. And his counsel was always good. But it wasn't until after I left Congress that our friendship truly blossomed into what it is today, a daily phone call, profound conversations about the state of the Union, the state of the world. Dick, of course, chairs my Institute of Politics and Global Affairs at Cornell University. And we're so grateful to him for that leadership. And he's also dedicated to the state of democracy and helped us launch our campaign for the future of democracy to build resilience around democratic norms. And we're grateful for that as well. But folks, it's so much deeper than a title and a responsibility. His friendship has informed me more about the complexities of the U.S.-Israeli relationship than any testimony or legislative memo ever could. His counsel has taught me about how we pursue policies that are just and fair, policies that sustain the long-term interests of both Israel and the United States. And I'm so grateful to him for that. And his friendship has taught me that the U.S.-Israeli relationship is more than just a talking point, more than a campaign slogan. It is a matter of smart and moral policy built on an enduring bond. His friendship has taught me that based on decades of experience, a lifetime of public service, a commitment to finding a way to make things better for people every single day. Now, I have to tell you, my favorite moments with Dick have been listening to his stories about negotiating for the economic survival of New York City, hearing how he outwitted and outsmarted some pretty smart people. I love hearing those stories. And he did those things to ensure the fundamentals of good public policy. He did those things so that we could give everyone a shot for a decent place to live in a city and in neighborhoods that are safe and prosperous, in places that give opportunity to everyone, whether it's New York City or the state of New York or America, based on hard work and fairness. There are other favorites. I love sitting in his office and listening to the phone ring constantly. Another governor, another senator, another mayor. In fact, I think he talks to more of my former colleagues than I have talked to on a typical day, plus diplomats and journalists. I remember my wife Kara and I joined Dick and Kathy for dinner at their home in Wainscott 2 summers ago. And in the middle of this barbecue, who traipses in but the governor of Montana, who was running for president at the time. Just another barbecue with Dick and Kathy and another governor, another person who sought Dick Ravich's counsel as they ran for president or served as president. And I guess that's the ultimate mark that Dick makes. He is a friend who makes a difference on his friends and multiplies those friendships to make a fundamental and profound difference on the world. And so for that, Dick, we are so grateful. I can't wait for our next meal with a prime minister or a governor or a president who wants to sit at your table. I want to thank you for inviting Kara and me and our family to your table. We all love you just so dearly. Thank you, Dick Ravich.
It's a pleasure and a great honor to be here tonight, even though obviously not in person. I can't imagine any organization at this point in my 87th year that is more meaningful than any other to accord me the kind of honor that you have. I want to thank Peter and Elizabeth. Elizabeth I've known since she was a teenager. Her father and I were business partners. We were the only 2 real estate developers who cared more about the politics and social implications of what we were doing than the amount of money we made. We built the first racially integrated housing ever built in Washington, D.C. together. But I have to tell you, Steve Israel's remarks meant so much to me. Yes, indeed, we've been friends. We have walked the same path with respect to Israel, with respect to U.S. politics, with respect to our beloved city and state for many, many years. But our friendship really, as Steve said, got so much closer since Steve retired from the House and devoted his life to doing things to make our democracy work more effectively, more fairly, and devoted his life to the security and future of the state of Israel. I have rarely in the course of my 87 years run into any human being with whom I have a closer kinship intellectually on all the things that are important to me than I do with Steve. And he has broadened my horizons, educated me, enabled me to meet many of his colleagues on a basis of friendship, like Adam Schiff and many others, and all of which have given me an opportunity to go up a lot faster on the learning curve, as well as to have some modicum of influence about the things that I care most deeply about with respect to the future. Having 11 grandchildren, it's impossible for me to offer opinions, to support candidates, to criticize the Israeli government without being sure I understand the consequences on my family that will follow me. And it is with love for them, with unambiguous conviction about what will make the world a better place that I will accept this very, very unique honor tonight and wish this organization a long journey and a successful one. And I hope forever to be on the front lines with you in the battles that lie ahead.
Hello. It is a privilege to send greetings to my close friend, Board Chair Susie Gelman, to the tireless leaders of the Israel Policy Forum, and to all those attending your 2020 annual event. Since 1993, the Israel Policy Forum has been a critical resource for policymakers, Jewish community leaders, and members of the next generation of leaders, united by our shared commitment to preserving Israel's future as a Jewish, democratic, and secure state. Today's honorees, Abner Goldstine, Brianna Goodlin, and my dear friend Dick Ravich, have been unwavering in their support for this important mission. Congratulations to you all on your well-deserved recognition. For America, Israel is a friend, a partner in democracy, and an ally in the fight for peace and security in the region and in the world. As I've often said, the founding of the State of Israel was the greatest political achievement of the 20th century. And for over 70 years, America's pledge has remained the same. Israel and America are connected now and forever. That pledge is honored in the Congress, where support for Israel remains ironclad and bipartisan. That is why last year the House passed a bipartisan resolution that supports a real and lasting peace between Israel and the Palestinians, an initiative with which the Israel Policy Forum was crucially involved. The resolution expressly endorses a two-state solution as its objective and discourages steps by either side that would put a peaceful end to the conflict further out of reach, including unilateral annexation of territory or efforts to achieve Palestinian statehood status outside the framework of negotiations with Israel. Today and every day, we rededicate ourselves to this noble goal in pursuit of a future of peace, prosperity, and opportunity for all who call Israel home. On behalf of the United States Congress, thank you, Israel Policy Forum, for your bold leadership and trusted partnership to build a brighter world for all. Thank you.
It's my great pleasure to speak with Congressman Ted Deutch, who represents Florida's 22nd District. Ted is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and chairs the subcommittee on the Middle East, North Africa, and international terrorism. He's also a very good friend of Israel Policy Forum and a good personal friend. Since we have limited time, we'll be posting our full discussion to our website, israelpolicyforum.org, as an Israel Policy podcast. Thank you so much, Ted, for participating in our virtual annual event, and Chag Sameach.
Thanks, Susie. Thanks. It's great to be with you. Happy Hanukkah, and thanks for the great job you're doing as board chair. And if I may, just before we get started, I'd love to thank your policy director, Michael Kopla, and Director of Government Relations, Aaron Weinberg, for always being great assets to me and our staff and the work that we all do together on the Hill.
Thank you, Ted. Ted, as you very well know, our core issue at Israel Policy Forum is advancing and promoting the two-state solution as the only way to effectively solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and guarantees Israel's future as Jewish, democratic, and secure. What do you see as the main challenges facing the two-state solution moving forward?
Well, there's obviously been an erosion of confidence on all sides, all the way around. We've moved from a place of how to get to a two-state solution to how to try to save a two-state solution. And there's a lot of trust to rebuild on all sides. The domestic politics are really significant, again, on all sides. They've made this a much more challenging space to work. President-elect talked a lot about returning to norms, and that's where I think you'll see a lot of the impact. There's been this incredible focus on the personalities the past 4 years, and what we need is real ground level diplomacy again to create conditions on the ground where peace is possible. Restarting U.S. dialogue with the Palestinians is going to be critical. It starts with restoring life-saving humanitarian assistance. That's obvious and important, significant step. And then also, Susie, we've talked about this before, but removing politics from the U.S.-Israel relationship is also key. It's a special relationship that serves our security interests, and it's rooted in our shared values. It's not, nor should it be seen as some sort of prop to shore up votes at home. And so we're going to have an administration that's working for what is in the long-term interest of our country and Israel's lasting security, and that's going to be an important change.
This may be somewhat redundant, but the Biden-Harris team has been clear about its position supporting the goal of two states, recognizing it may not be around the corner, and opposing unhelpful moves such as unilateral annexation of West Bank territory or Palestinian unilateral declarations of statehood. Do you see President-elect Biden taking an active role to seek to resolve the conflict, understanding what you just said about what the priorities are in the first days, weeks, and months of a new administration? Do you see them taking an active role to resolve the conflict, pursuing more of a conflict management approach, or something in between?
I think it's somewhere in between. There's a whole lot to unpack from the last 4 years of President Trump in this space. I'm not saying undo, I'm saying unpack, and some of it will remain in place, and some of it I think will be reevaluated. But there's got to be, to your point, there's got to be a priority in reopening U.S.-Palestinian relations. We can't be good partners for Israel if we're not talking to the Palestinians, and we play a critical role in security training and mediating and maintaining stability through our relationships that we have on both sides. But again, I don't see in the first months the new president launching a major peace process effort. I think they'll focus on restoring some sense of normalcy to the relationship and to the region. I do think, though, that that they're keenly aware that time is really of the essence as far as facts on the ground go, and so they won't want to see steps taken that jeopardize the prospect of two states. So that's I hope that the parties all recognize the need to refrain from making unilateral moves in the early days of the new administration. The goal obviously is to retain the possibility of a two-state solution, which, as you point out, is the critical work that Israel Policy Forum focuses on.
Ted, you've been one of the leading voices on Israel-related issues in Congress. You've helped pass a number of bipartisan resolutions, which Israel Policy Forum has supported, including those that have spoken to the importance of a viable two-state solution and expressing opposition to unilateral annexation, which, as you remember, during the summer certainly looked like a likely prospect. Most recently, we were grateful for your extraordinary leadership and partnership with us on the Deutch, Schakowsky, Schneider, Price letter that secured the signatures of over 190 of your colleagues to express concern with possible unilateral Israeli annexation of West Bank territory. Going forward, how can Congress play a helpful role in encouraging productive steps by all parties?
Well, first, let me thank IPF for the role that you play on the Hill in educating members and staff and helping to galvanize support for really critical efforts. That letter is something that we worked on together. The IPF team is I think one of the most strategic and forward-thinking on these issues. And so again, I greatly appreciate your assistance there. And just as I'd like to see the U.S.-Israel relationship depoliticized elsewhere, I would also like to see that same thing happen in Congress. I've made clear many times on the House floor that using Israel or attempting to use Israel for partisan political gain is detrimental to Israel. It's detrimental to the U.S.-Israel relationship. It ultimately hurts our own national interests. So on our side, I hope that every move related to Israel will no longer be seen in opposition just because it was done by Trump. I think that's key. And on the other side, I hope that we'll stop painting, some will stop painting Democrats as anti-Israel and introducing resolutions or letters where that's the sole purpose. We've got to speak as often and as clearly as we can with one voice, because that's the best way to further all of our interests. Supporting two states has always been a bipartisan issue. Supporting assistance to Palestinians was a bipartisan issue. And for some of my colleagues, Susie, who want to shift the conversation on Israel, they want to talk about withholding aid, they want to talk about punitive measures. It's up to all of us to explain why it's not in our interest to do that. And so we've got to elevate the voices of the majority of the members of the caucus who are friends and supporters of Israel, who believe in a two-state solution, who condemn BDS, who understand the need to engage with the Palestinians, and who recognize that it's not an either or. We need to work on all of these issues if we hope to be able to move toward peace.
Ted? Sorry, I lost the connection for a second. Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
I can.
I'm sorry about that. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay.
So I didn't hear the end of your question, but the answer, but I think you answered it.
I'm not sure what you missed. I'm sure it was brilliant.
Okay, well, it's okay. The camera didn't miss it.
Okay.
As we know, the Trump administration has withheld U.S. aid to the Palestinians, while some of the most progressive reaches of the Democratic Party are calling to condition security assistance to Israel based on certain Israeli government actions. Could you share your views on U.S. assistance to Israel and the Palestinians?
Sure. So, as I've now alluded to several times, I believe that providing assistance to the Palestinian people is in our interest, and it's in Israel's interest. Our humanitarian assistance shouldn't be politicized. We give life-saving assistance because it is the moral thing to do, and it creates stability on the ground, and that's in our national interest. The Taylor-Force Act already prohibits aid from going directly to the Palestinian Authority until they stop the martyr payment program, and I was supportive of that. I continue to be supportive of that, and we, I hope, can find some encouragement by the reporting that the Palestinians are now looking at reforms in that area as a signal to the incoming administration. So that's, again, hopefully a positive sign. We have to wait to see. I work to remove the legal barriers that were put on the delivery of assistance through the Anti-Terrorism Clarification Act, Trump administration still refuses to let that assistance flow. Lindsey Graham led the restoration of $75 million that Congress appropriated, which was passed in a bipartisan budget bill, and that the administration held. And to this day, we have no real answers from the administration on what the status is or what the metrics are for their aid review that started in 2018. So withholding aid was always about trying to bully the Palestinians into accepting the Trump peace plan, and there will be an opportunity with the new administration to move forward there, again, respecting Taylor force, but also understanding the importance of humanitarian assistance. With respect to Israel, I've been clear. I don't support conditioning aid, period. Like the majority of my colleagues, I believe in following the law, and that's what we do. It's the law lays out what our assistance can't be used for. It's for self-defense, and that's traditionally what we've done and need to continue to. It's not about withholding assistance. I don't think it's in our interest to start putting restrictions on aid that might impact Israel's ability to protect innocent civilians. And I know the Biden administration, the incoming Biden administration, values real diplomacy enough that we're not going to need assistance as a lever. They'll have an actual strategy for how to engage here in a constructive way that furthers all of these goals that we're talking about. And importantly, as much as I can tell you, I don't support conditioning aid. The president-elect has been clear on that, and ultimately, it's going to be his policies that the administration will be implementing.
The normalization agreements with the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and now Morocco have changed much of the focus for many in the region. What is your assessment of these developments, and do you think these agreements can be leveraged to create progress on the Israeli-Palestinian front?
Well, I welcome all of these agreements. I think Israel has so much in common with its Gulf neighbors that we can all benefit from. And the fact is, anytime we can further peace, we ought to do it. Absolutely, we ought to do it. And I think it's an incredible turning point, a huge milestone. I know the Biden administration is supportive. I know they want to continue to grow the relationships, build upon the Abraham Accords. We know that they don't represent a substitute for peace between Israel and the Palestinians, but I do hope, to your question, that they create some new momentum. I hope Palestinian leaders see what's possible. I hope they see the shift and the benefits that brings, and that they'll want to find a way to be a part of it instead of refusing negotiations. So I'm hopeful that a new administration that is committed to diplomacy, that wants to build upon the Abraham Accords, will be able to package this together and help us move forward.
What are your thoughts on the transactions the United States has provided to facilitate these agreements, whether it be arms sales to the UAE or Western Sahara recognition in the case of Morocco last week?
Well, I've said all along, if there are side deals that are being made as part of these, Congress needs to know what they are. The arms sale wasn't initially disclosed in the way that the Sudan terror designation was, or the Western Sahara piece was. So the UAE sale trickled out afterward, and I've articulated the concerns that I have on that front. Preserving Israel's QME is not just something that I think is important. We have a statutory obligation to do it. Protecting the transfer of technology to the use of American origin weapons in Yemen and Libya to others is critically important, and we need to fully analyze that before this goes forward. The Sudan piece, we've got to encourage transition. I'm hopeful that we can resolve that one in a satisfactory way that addresses what are really legitimate claims of those who were impacted by terrorism. And Morocco's a tougher case because there's been this long-standing bipartisan consensus that that's been to support a political process, and so we have to we've got to at least be mindful of the potential signals that get sent to other places with respect to territorial disputes around the world when there is also an ongoing political process. So I want to see these agreements flourish. I think they're really important, but we have to be clear also that we're making them because they further our own interests as well. And so with everything else, as with so much of what we've seen the past 4 years, when President Trump sees a deal to be made, it's about a deal, and foreign policy obviously isn't about just getting to yes. It's about also sustaining and furthering our national security interests and doing so from a position of our values, and that's the way we've got to judge these, certainly going forward.
Looking at the region as a whole, Ted, and a new incoming administration, what gives you hope for the future of the region?
Well, I'd start, I guess, Susie, just thinking about travels to the region, which these days we all think about travel trips that we've made anywhere. But in this case, thinking about travels to the region, I've met really incredible people who are so resilient and just want security. They want a better future. That gives me hope thinking about them. When the new administration looks at the region, I think they understand what it means for America to lead with our values, and that human rights have a prominent place in foreign policy, and that means that we act to try to mitigate human disaster, and we value and we put resources in programs that make the future of the region brighter. So, as you look at Israel, I do think that this is a new era in regional cooperation, and I'm so looking forward to watching that develop and playing whatever role I can. And those of us who've been doing this for a long time know how much Israel has to contribute to the international community, and bringing these ties that have been growing quietly for some time into the open, I think is going to yield really tremendous opportunities all the way around. Frankly, in Israel, in these countries in the region, but really globally, and that's what I look forward to. That's what makes me so hopeful.
Turning to Iran for a moment, or turning back to Iran, since you mentioned it earlier, just a few weeks ago, the Iranian parliament passed a law to expand the country's nuclear program and stop granting access to the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. The British, French, and German foreign ministries put out a statement saying that Iran must not take steps to expand its nuclear program if it wants to preserve the JCPOA. What is your view of the possibility of successfully negotiating a follow-up agreement to the JCPOA, as President Biden has suggested?
Well, I think in this case, just starting where you left off, it's important for us to be engaging with our allies when it comes to Iran, and that's true for our European allies. It's true for our regional allies, and it's especially true for Israel. The president-elect and Secretary-designate Blinken and the next National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, they've all made very clear that we can move back to the JCPOA as part of this broader plan to address both the challenges with the JCPOA, to make it stronger and to make it longer, something that Tony referred to repeatedly throughout the campaign. Jake Sullivan's floated the idea of parallel negotiations on non-nuclear issues. Some people talk about re-entering the deal for a specific period of time to try to work out issues of concern. There are lots of ways to do this, and I have no doubt that the team that the president-elect is putting in place, judging by the people that we've seen so far, are the right people to work on this, and they're really talented, and they know the issues very, very well, and they also have the benefit of hindsight and know that concerns from 2015 in terms of consultations with our partners, areas where Iran has pushed the boundaries and tried to cheat at the margins. They're aware of all of that. So I'm confident that there's going to be a clear path that helps achieve the goal that we all support, that's preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, also while addressing the missile program, their malign activities in the region, and their human rights violations at home. All of that's going to be good for our security and that of our allies. And it's hard. There's no doubt about it, and it's really challenging. But I think we just all have to be careful not to simply assume that we're back in 2015. So much has happened since. The region looks so different now. We've got to learn from that period and give the new administration the opportunity to lay out clearly what the plan is to address these very real concerns.
Last question. You've spoken forcefully about Iran policy over the past 4 years, challenging the current administration's maximum pressure approach. Regardless of the conversation around returning to the JCPOA, all parties agree that Iran's malign influence in the region, including its support for terrorist proxies like Hezbollah in Lebanon and others that regularly attack and endanger the security of Israel, is problematic and despicable behavior. What are the areas you think are most important to address in limiting Iranian regional influence and ensuring Israeli security?
All of them. I mean, look, you're right. I was critical when the administration pulled out of the deal, and we've now and has failed to really articulate a strategy in Iran, and so we now have Iran with 12 times more enriched uranium than they did before we pulled out of the deal, and moving forward with underground construction in Natanz and moving forward in other ways that violate the deal. Their intentions in the region have been clear for a long time, and their primary goal in the last several years has been to establish this land bridge from Iran, Iraq, through Syria to Hezbollah and Lebanon. And they've imported weapons to Hezbollah. The technology to produce weapons on their own is something that they've provided. Iran's export of weapons, whether to Hezbollah or to Islamic Jihad or the Houthis, that's an international problem. And we need much greater cooperation and interdiction efforts, frankly. And that's something that can be done without Iran. And we could do that among our allies and partners if we have the resources and if we have the cooperation and leadership from the president to do it. So their ballistic missile pose a really serious threat to Israel and to our other friends in the region, and frankly to the Europeans. So a lot of the capabilities there are being produced internally, but cracking down on the illicit smuggling of missile parts is something, again, that we can do with greater international cooperation. So look, Russia and China shouldn't want to see Iran with ICBMs. And we have a specific procurement channel for Iran's legitimate needs set up through the JCPOA. We have the conventional weapons ban in place. This is all part of the conversation. It's just unacceptable that Russia and China aren't doing stricter enforcement here. And that's a point of leverage that I think the new administration will have if the other partners to the JCPOA want to succeed. So there's a lot for us to focus on with Iran, but as critical as the nuclear program is and stopping Iran's nuclear program, there is so much, as we're considering how to do that, there is so much that we can do with American leadership to confront the other challenges that Iran poses as well.
Ted, this has been great. I want to just thank you again for joining us for our first and hopefully our only virtual annual event. We hope to be in person next year, God willing. And we at Israel Policy Forum really look forward to continuing to work with you and your outstanding staff to advance the cause of peace between Israelis and Palestinians. So thank you so much, and Chag Sameach to you and your family.
Thanks, Susie. Chag Sameach, and thanks for the really, really great and stimulating discussion. I hope everyone watching got something out of it too. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you to Dick Ravitch, Abner Goldstine, and Brianna Goodlin for everything you've done to support this organization and to make this evening possible. Thank you for your leadership. I also want to thank members of our board and our staff for all that you do each and every day to lift our organization up and to push our message forward. Lastly, I want to thank all of you who are joining us this evening, not only for your support of this evening's program, but for your support of the important work that lies ahead to build more informed, more effective leaders in favor of a viable two-state resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and a more secure, Jewish, and democratic Israel. The work ahead in Washington, in the American Jewish community, and with emerging young professionals is only possible with your support, and we are so very grateful and thankful to have you with us in the work that lies ahead. Have a wonderful evening. Be safe. Be well. Chag Sameach. Happy Hanukkah. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.